It's really wonderful to be back here. I graced this stage a couple of years ago, and it's wonderful to be back. Love this conference. If you want to see some amazing speakers, I recommend you see Harper Reed tomorrow. We've got Jess Jarvis in the house. You can check him out in about half an hour. But what I'm going to do is talk about what's happening now. I'm going to talk about the wrap-up of most of today. So hopefully what you'll do is sort of get a sense of what's been going on. The world is not like this anymore. I love this. I have no idea where this is from. Don't you feel like that? Huh. But here we go. Let's get in with this. I want to talk about culture, code, and creativity. That's the context of all of what I think we're doing here today. This is a very good example, in my opinion, of all the sense of something that's all about culture, no code. Who had one of these growing up? Just quick show of hands. Who still uses it? One. How the roller skates working out, brother. Awesome. So this is an example of a company that was all about culture. And here's an example of Google. Now, we love Google. We love everything they do, except for sometimes they just don't quite get it right. Here's an example. I mean, if you don't want to have any friends by the afternoon, wear a pair of these bad boys around for the day, because I guarantee you will not have any friends. That's a very good example of something that's all about code, not about culture. I think you need a blend of both of those. We all know, and that's why places like this and this conference all talks about code as global instances. So with that, you guys can build anything, physically, digitally. That's what all of these amazing things allow us to do. But what I really like is local culture. Now, culture that's local for me that doesn't translate well is great, because it allows me to get lost in the culture of people. And here's an example of it. Now, in Ghana, this is a popular brand. Peak Cola doesn't translate anywhere else in English very well. I'm not up for a big old swig of pee in the afternoon. It's not really my bag. But hey, no judgment. It's funny that every year there's a new word that gets entered in the dictionary, and the official word of last year was this. So now we're at a world where we speak through emoji, tears of joy. It's amazing to think about this. I thought the dictionary used to be A to Z. I have no idea how to find this shit, but I think it's really interesting to think about the culture landscape that we're entering into. Every year that I spend a lot of time with brands, they use words, and they overuse certain words. And it's going to come as no surprise that this one is the one I hear. Now, I don't know how many times you've heard this today. I might throw this into my presentations 50 times because I'm a buzzword king. But we'll see whether we get there. Look, man, and when I speak to brands, I'm like, oh, you want disruption? Awesome. How are you going to do that? Like, oh, let's just use some technology. Really? Good luck. What about your business model that's crushed? So here's an example. We all know these cats. Imagine being Hilton Hotel competing with somebody that says every single hotel room is different. Or these cats democratize the ability for you to invest in startups. And that's the beauty about why we're here for the next 2 days, to be inspired by some of that tech coming down the pike. Or these guys, how we get around, transport. It's all changing because the business model is disrupted through technology, no doubt. But understanding human needs, in my opinion, is half the job of fulfilling it. So look, it doesn't matter whether we stand at a whiteboard as we do our strat developments and say, hey, let's psychographically target people. You know, let's think about believers and strivers and makers. It doesn't matter who you're actually attuning to. What matters is whether you take that or whether you take Maslow's ruler hierarchy. What I can tell you is this, guys. Technology is absolutely changing our behavior, not our needs. Our needs are fulfilled. And if you think about it, this is a very good example of human need. Scumbags. But hey, what's fascinating for me is that we suddenly then get to the connected human. We're all talking and walking around with all this technology on us. Really? Are we talking about this cat? I'm not sure. Reminds me of the opening video. I don't know whose video that was, but it's pretty awesome. How hilarious. Okay, so from my perspective, you know, everyone's talking, the topic du jour is VR. Now, I can either be very bullish about VR or very optimistic. The thing that I find most optimistic about it is this. If you go and watch a film today for 2 hours, it's director's point of view. You get that. If you laugh at a scene and I cry at a scene, we can't change our point of view. But what's interesting is you put a pair of these bad boys on, you become the director of that content. So if we actually understand what the emotions of these devices are doing, we could potentially morph the content based on your emotions. So if you're laughing through a scene and I'm crying, the content could change. And so that's some of the things that I think optimistically about where it's going. You've also got a lot of these simulators to make people feel really amazing. If you think you're going to sit in a cage in your dungeon in the basement of your room and play games for 12 hours with VR on, I don't think you will, because the experience of it is actually quite unreal. But then you've got simulators to try and make you feel like you're doing something, like perhaps this thing is simulating you're on a roller coaster. I would argue, though, if you have to be in a room and a cage that big to simulate being on a roller coaster, why don't you go on a roller coaster? But that's just me. IoT, I mean, that's probably a hot topic here today. I just landed, so I'm not quite sure whether that's been the hot topic, but it's Internet of Everything, isn't it? Very quickly becoming about emotions, because it's a big marketplace, and what's amazing for us is there's smart objects. They're all in our bodies. They're actually, interestingly, also in our homes. So this is a beautiful product called Hello. You clip this to your pillow, and it monitors your sleep patterns. But it has some listening technology in it, and it will tell you that you woke up, say, at 2:30 because a dog was barking. So it's now become real purpose. This is called Quitbit. This is a smart cigarette lighter. This will allow you not just to light your cigarettes. It'll tell you the number of smokes you smoke per day versus your quota. So this is a fitness product, actually. You've got Pacify. This is a smart pacifier. This will monitor the number of times a child will suck on a pacifier and tell you when it's starting to teeth. So a lot of these smart devices are there. And then we all think about wearables. Now, the wearable space for me is really interesting. Just a quick show of hands who has one. This room must be packed with these. Oh, we've got about 3 or 4. Who has one but doesn't have it on? The more hands typically go up. There's something about them that after about 6 months, it's just not interesting to wear them anymore. Your phone does very similar things to this sort of thing. But it's remarkable to me to think about that. If you think about these devices, it seems relatively easy to build one. It's incredibly hard to market one. Everybody in the room probably has different types of wearables, and they're different shapes and sizes, colors, forms, factors. They're designed for different people, and they're stunning. Some of them are Masters analog devices. Some of them look very digital. They're all beautiful, and they're all measuring us, and they're all collecting data. Those little bits of information are being sent to us in different packets now. And so what's fascinating to me is that the information architecture on this device is going to be radically different. Now, if you just think that it's limited to the wrist and the face, it's not true. There's about 290 of them, and this is one that is interesting.
Have you ever noticed that the world's most powerful men don't carry a wallet? In fact, have you ever seen them pay for anything? Well, now you can join them. Introducing the MJ Bale Power Suit. In collaboration with Heritage Bank and Visa PayWave, we've developed the technology to embed a contactless payment chip and antenna into the sleeve of a suit. So now you can pay invisibly.
What do you think of those bad boys? But what's interesting to me is that everything now has built-in intelligence, hasn't it? Everything is collecting data, and it's sending little bits of information to us when, where, what, why, and how we want it. And the information architecture is radically different because we've got square, circular, round, rectangular. They're all different shapes and sizes. So architecture of information is really going to be different. And that's where the wearable web is going to be really quite fascinating, especially if you're a design architect inside the house. But okay, so what? So look, traditionally, I think what's interesting about the so what for me is this. I think we're in the business of sight, sound, and motion. Most of us today are in the business of some sort of marketing. And what we're trying to do is drive emotion. Why? 75% of purchase decisions today are made emotionally. So it's all about driving emotions. Now, as a kid, these are the things that I grew up with. I grew up with these 4 Ps, price, place, promotion, product. Some people still talk about those. I actually think it's been replaced by a new paradigm of 4 Ps, and it's about this: pedigree, performance. It's about partnership, and it's about platforms. And life has changed since I grew up in Australia. If you guys have been wondering about my accent, that's where I'm from. I'm actually one of 10 kids. That's the house that I grew up in as a child. This is my family. That's me on the left. So 10 children, 2-bedroom house, lots of therapy. We can get to that at drinks. But here's what's fascinating. Oh, by the way, I have the title of the prophet because I'm the first planker on the planet. Whatever, dude. So here's what's interesting. I'm of the generation that when you bought your first car is when you had freedom, independence, and self-expression. Freedom, independence, and self-expression came at 17 for me. But today, kids under the age of 2 can operate your swiping devices better than you can. It turns out about 37% of them can. Which means that, and I don't have them, so when you give them analog, they just think it's broken. So that's the world we're in, isn't it? I could watch this all day. I think that's awesome. But guys, look, the reality is this. The days of consumers consuming content are well over. There's lots of topics around here about paywalls and interesting information, but the reality is this: it's a different type of landmark. We now have the creator, the critic, and the curator. You lot are the slash gen. The little bastards that think that videographers, graphic designers, DJs, fashionistas, influencers, brand ambassadors have more capability, more tools at your disposal to amplify all of these things that are really interesting. And just when brands figure out where to actually put messaging to contact you, you swarm to bright lights. There's many, many more places for you to get to now to try and articulate what's actually happening when we're communicating with humans. At the end of the day, the audience now have an audience, but it's not about the interconnected network of ones and zeros. It's about humans connecting with humans. And what I think is interesting is that part of that is this. People use personal expression as a new form of entertainment. So it's fascinating that people will go to extremes to that. They go to extremes, man. That's the second tallest building in Hong Kong. And it's fascinating to me because I look at this and think, well, if personal expression is a new form of entertainment, is this generation a throw-up? How good is that Banksy? Awesome. If nothing else, I give you that this afternoon. But as much as I thought they were a we generation, it turns out they're a me generation. And sorry, a me generation, not a we generation. Now, here's why. If I go and hang out with young adults, like, older high school kids or college kids, what happens is that when we talk to brands, they think about popularity. When I talk to younger audiences, they talk about locking their network down. So if I talk to them and say, hey, who's on Instagram? 100% of their hands go up. Whose Instagram is set to private? Most of their hands stay up. So we're potentially going to an environment that is a lockdown, peer-to-peer network, not the open social web, because there's been a surge of insecurity, especially around younger women around there. But what's interesting is as soon as something is super niche and becomes popular, people want to make their popular thing go back to super niche because we don't want to hang out in those big villages. We want to hang out in sort of little tiny networks of people. And it's fascinating for me that we grew up, guys, in the awareness-based advertising arena. We're moving to a world where it's all about advocacy, word of mouth, peer-to-peer. But the younger audience do want to have these values that make sense. They want to achieve happiness, spend time with their family and friends, be true to themselves, and be financially stable. These values are more closely aligned to their grandparents' generation than their parents' generation. If I speak to some of these kids, they're spending more time in books and they're saying, why do we have 3 cars and where's the electric car and why are we not off the grid? It's really interesting to think about some of those values that they have. They're way too busy to go. They get a lot of information from feeds, but they represent a massive spend for you guys. And that's why everybody's trying to target them. They've got the spend. It turns out that a lot of them use a lot of devices each day. They're bored. Now, boredom is a problem because what happened when I was a kid is that when the sun came up, my parents would boot me outside and say, don't come in till the sun goes down. Today, that playground is the screen. And what they're going to that screen for is no surprise to you. It's about entertainment. And it's fascinating to think about, the dynamics of where we are today is changing. One of the largest contributors today to stress that's killing us all is media overload. So the shit you're producing is stressing us all out. About a dozen times a day, my leg will false vibrate. I suffer from the phantom phone vibration syndrome, which I'm sure some of you do here as well. It's akin to having a cocaine habit, I'm told. But just be careful because the thing that I think is the metric we all need to worry about is attention. No matter what comes at us, there's always going to be 24 hours in the day. We cannot change that attunement. But what we can do is understand that because our behaviors have changed, we understand that we're all acting the same. This is not a young person's game, it's everybody's. It doesn't matter where I am, we all act the same technique. And it's fascinating for me to think about what happens here. Creativity for you guys that are creatives in the house has to be redefined. I mean, Adobe did some great work recently. They said that 88% of creative directors believe that the best days are yet to come in a survey they did. 79% trust their gut instinct over technology, which helps give them control. So that's kind of the favorability here for us. So we're no longer in the advertising industry. Is that true? You're in the content business. Okay, if you're in the content business, then you're not competing against advertising, you're competing against popular culture. You're competing against everybody. Anybody with a phone is now a publisher and a photographer. And it's fascinating from my perspective because everyone talks about real-time marketing. I don't actually think that's that important. I think it's more about relevant marketing. Speak to me when I want to be spoken to, if I even care about you. And that's the world we're in, because the world is completely overwhelming. You know this. You hit with 1,900 media messages per day, then it's underwhelming because you can't find what you're looking for. And it's fascinating because back in the day, this is what brands used to have to worry about, just engaging with people. Today, it looks more like this. And sort of this is just some of the touch points that people are expected to have some sort of relationship with brand and consumer. But the obvious thing for me today is that people are outpacing you. So as we're on these devices and we're doing this, there's no ads. So we now have to act differently. So people are outpacing marketing. That's actually very optimistic. That's a great opportunity for us to think about. And what about data? So the discussion about data has to be super hot here, man. But it's interesting from my perspective, because as a creative, without data, there's no creative. Without creative, there's no data. And in the old days, we used to do a thing called run and done. You used to run campaigns and hope to God that sales came in. And when they didn't, you'd work on your cover your ass campaign. But now what we've got is the ability to run scenarios with probable effect. That's the beauty of data. And if you use it correctly, you can do some amazing things with it. And people don't just want to be gratified when they're buying and making purchases. They want to feel hyper-gratified, like what Domino's did. You tweet out a pizza and you get a pizza delivered. You think you can do that with no data? No way, man. It needs a mountain of data for that thing to be amazing. But with data, you can understand that location will give you context. That's one of the big pieces of data that you need to know what people are doing in the context that they're doing it in. And you can start to deliver these unique values to them. And we've moved upon the world of advertising. But I'm also told that your brand needs to be an experience. So how are some of those ways you can create an experience? Well, one of them is video. I'm a huge fan of video. It turns out we all love it. I mean, all of us are freaky for it. We love to engage in video, and we don't care, guys, whether it's long form or short form. We just want to be shown stuff. Steve Jobs had this amazing quote. A lot of times people do not know what they want until you show them. And that's the culture where we are today. Amazingly, you can tell incredible stories in 6 seconds or as long as you want. We are no longer locked in the world of 30s and 60s. The world has moved from there, hasn't it? And then you find contagious stuff like this from the creators. Look how good this is. I mean, how good is that? So good we'll watch it a couple of times. Yeah, it just gets better. Here's what's amazing. I think the most overused word in our industry is storytelling. Because the truth of this is, man, if you think about it, it's really less about the telling and it's more about the story. And if you build good content and you put it in smart places, which is really easy for me to do, but I know is incredibly hard to do, you can come up with contagious experience where you just can't seem to take your eyes off it, like this fabulous piece of content.
Don't thank me. Thank the savings.
You can't skip this Geico ad because it's already over. Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Amazing. So here's the deal. That's a fairly large insurance company in the US. They treat their brand like a portfolio, meaning they do a lot of work, they amplify that work once it becomes contagious, but they start doing it digitally first, and then they use all the traditional media channels. But what's incredible about that is that I wanted to talk over that video, but I could see you guys were so compelled you actually wouldn't listen to me anyway. But what's incredible is that logo for Geico is pretty damn big. It turns out that about 70% of us don't care whether something's blatantly branded or subtly branded. If it's a great story, we just want to be engaged with it. And that's the power of story. And that's the power, I think, of the great idea of creative. It's not just about technology. It's what about the story that's trying to move the human condition forward. And that's the real reality. So the culture we are part of today is reframe. It's not good enough to remix your budgets. You have to come up with something, and that's what invention's about. That's what these 2 days will do for you, is inspire you to invent stuff. That's what reframe culture is today, and that's where we are right now. The other thing is find the right people. It's not about celebrity. It's actually about influencer. It's the power of the influencer that can celebrate your brand. Look for ecosystems of moments. Stay with me for a second. This is it. The ability to say, if I actually want to be able to target the right person, right place, right time, you need to understand my moment, not my day part, and it's separated by male and female. So look for ecosystems of moments. You guys can invent those. That's where I think it's going to be quite amazing. Give up your brand if you think you own your brand. Consumers own it. If you don't believe me, just go into Pinterest and type your brand in. If they want to tour with your brand, we are part of a maker and a hacker culture. Things like adult coloring books are now a big thing. People go home and color in books. So people want to make stuff. They want to do things today. They may want to do things with your brand, and that's great because it reinforces brand ownership and, wonderful brand scenarios. Things like brand sentiment go through the roof. And look, it's not good enough anymore to talk about the future of digital marketing. That's not true. It's just marketing in this digital world, and the reality is this. You can't have separated two different teams of, product development and digital development. They all have to be together and work together. Nobody delineates that today. It's all the same brand. So we have to bring those together because it's all the same moment. And lastly, this industry can only push forward if we fall forward. We have to do stuff that celebrates pioneering. It doesn't just celebrate the awards. We need to celebrate the stuff that is really trying to push the envelope forward, and it feels like pioneering because the sooner we fail, the sooner we get to succeed. And that's the real power of what we're here. And why I love to come and celebrate these sort of work with you and talk about the power of creativity and when we're touching humans, honestly, is this quote by Katharine Hepburn. If you obey all the rules, dude, you miss all the fun. So thanks very much. Enjoy the next 2 days.